Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. I had never been one to believe in horror stories. Not really. But that night, swiping on Tinder like it was a casual Friday night ritual, I stumbled upon her profile. Her name was Mia, and she looked stunning, with long dark hair that framed her face perfectly, and a smile that practically glowed against the backdrop of her photos. The bio read simply, "Let's create our own adventure." It was a cliché, but it piqued my interest. I swiped right, and within moments, I had a match. We started chatting, and Mia's messages came through with an effortless charm. She had a way of making even the most mundane topics feel like they were laced with excitement. I learned she was into hiking, photography, and indie films, which were right up my alley. After a few days of texting, she suggested we meet up at a secluded spot in the woods, just outside the city. It seemed a little odd, but she promised it would be beautiful, and I was always up for an adventure. The day of our meetup arrived, and I drove out to the location she had shared with me. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon as I parked my car, casting eerie shadows along the narrow path that led into the woods. I felt a strange flutter of nerves in my stomach. It wasn't just the anticipation of meeting someone new. There was something off about the location. The trees stood tall and dense, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. I took a deep breath, shaking off the unease, and began walking down the path. As I ventured deeper into the woods, the sounds of the city faded away, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of crickets. It was oddly peaceful, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced around, half expecting to see Mia waiting for me, but the path was empty. I checked my phone, no messages. I was starting to feel like maybe I had made a mistake. After what felt like an eternity, I finally saw a figure in the distance. It was Mia, standing by a clearing, her silhouette framed by the fading light. I felt a rush of relief, mixed with excitement. As I approached, I noticed her expression was oddly serious. She greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The air felt thicker now, as if the trees were closing in around us. We started walking together, and as we talked, I couldn't help but feel that something was off. Her laughter had a hollow sound to it, and her gaze often drifted into the shadows as if she were expecting something or someone. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself that I was just overthinking it. After all, she was beautiful, and I was captivated by her. The path led us to a small, secluded lake, its surface reflecting the last rays of sunlight. It was stunning, but the serenity felt deceptive. I suggested we take some pictures, and Mia agreed, but her enthusiasm seemed forced. As she posed, I noticed she kept glancing over her shoulder, her smile faltering. I asked if everything was okay, but she just laughed it off, saying it was probably just her imagination. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just beyond the trees. Each time she laughed, a chill ran down my spine. I tried to focus on the moment, snapping photos, but it felt like I was capturing something sinister. The shadows around us grew longer, and the once inviting woods now felt like they were closing in. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves ominously. Mia's demeanor changed. She seemed increasingly restless, her eyes darting around as if she were waiting for someone. I asked her again if she was all right, but she just brushed me off, insisting it was just the shadows playing tricks. Then, without warning, she stopped walking and turned to me with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. She asked if I believed in fate. I was taken aback. It felt like a heavy question that didn't belong in casual conversation. Before I could respond, she stepped back, her expression shifting to something darker. In that moment, I felt a surge of panic. It was as if the air had thickened, making it hard to breathe. I took a step back, and that's when I noticed the way her gaze shifted. Not just to the shadows, but to something behind me. My heart raced as I turned around, half expecting to see a stranger lurking in the trees. But there was nothing, just the darkening woods. When I turned back to Mia, she was smiling again, but it was a smile that felt wrong. The beauty I had seen earlier was replaced by something cold and predatory. I took another step back, my instinct screaming at me to get away. She stepped forward again, her voice low and urgent, asking if I would trust her. I didn't answer. I was on high alert now, every nerve in my body screaming that I needed to leave. The shadows seemed to pulse around us, the woods closing in as I took one more step back. That's when I noticed something in her hand, a glint of metal. My heart sank as I recognized it. It was a small knife, glimmering in the fading light. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. My mind raced, piecing together every odd moment, every strange glance. This wasn't just a date, it was a trap. I turned to run just as she lunged at me. The adrenaline kicked in, and I sprinted down the path, branches clawing at my arms as I fled. I could hear her footsteps behind me, growing fainter but still persistent. I didn't stop until I reached my car, frantically fumbling with my keys. My hands were shaking, and the cold metal felt foreign against my palm. I glanced back, half expecting her to appear from the shadows, but there was nothing. I jumped into the car, locked the doors, and started the engine, my heart pounding in my chest. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. Had I just escaped something horrific? I glanced back at the road leading into the woods, the trees standing silent and still. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mia. "You didn't believe in fate, did you?" Chills ran down my spine as I realized that I had narrowly avoided nightmare. But even as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The woods loomed behind me, dark and foreboding, and as I pulled onto the main road, I couldn't help but wonder just how many others had fallen into her trap before me. I was never one to believe in horror stories, but the night I matched with Amanda on Tinder changed everything. It was a typical Friday evening, the kind where you're just scrolling through your phone, half-heartedly swiping left and right, looking for something, anything, to break the monotony. When her profile popped up, I was drawn in by her smile and the quirky bio that proclaimed her love for ghost stories and midnight drives. It seemed harmless enough, and I was curious about her fascination with the supernatural. We started chatting, and I learned that she lived in a small town about an hour away. The conversation flowed easily, and she had this captivating way of weaving personal anecdotes into our messages, making it feel like we'd known each other for years. I felt a strange connection, like we were on the same wavelength. After a few days of texting, she suggested we meet up. Her suggestion was a little unusual. She wanted to go to an old abandoned house rumored to be haunted. I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing through the horror flicks I'd seen, but curiosity won out. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? That Saturday, I drove to her town, my heart racing with excitement and a hint of fear. The sun had started to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the winding road. The house was on the outskirts, surrounded by a dense thicket of trees that seemed to whisper secrets as the wind rustled through the leaves. I parked in front of the house, a Victorian structure that had seen better days. The paint was peeling, and the windows were foggy, giving it an eerie look. Amanda was already there, standing on the porch with an adventurous glint in her eyes. She seemed so full of life, and yet there was something unsettling about the way she beckoned me to come closer. As we entered the house, the air grew thick and heavy, like a weight pressing down on my chest. The inside smelled of mold and decay, and the floorboards creaked under our weight. It felt like we were stepping into another era. Cobwebs hung from the corners, and the walls were lined with faded photographs of people long gone. I could feel the chill seeping into my bones, but Amanda was unbothered, her laughter echoing through the empty rooms. She led the way, exploring each room with childlike wonder, while I followed hesitantly, my heart pounding. We wandered into the living room, where a grand fireplace stood cold and empty. Amanda mentioned that the house had a history of strange occurrences, disembodied whispers, flickering lights, and cold spots. I laughed it off, trying to play along, but a knot of unease was forming in my stomach. It was just an old house, right? We decided to take some pictures, capturing the moment, But as I looked through the camera lens, I felt a strange sensation, like someone was watching us. I brushed it aside, attributing it to my overactive imagination. As we moved deeper into the house, I realized that the atmosphere was changing. The air felt heavier, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer. Amanda suggested we check out the basement, and I hesitated. There was something about that dark, gaping hole that sent chills down my spine. But I didn't want to seem cowardly, so I followed her down the creaky staircase. The basement was dimly lit, the only source of light coming from a single bulb that flickered ominously. We reached the bottom, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The space was cluttered with old furniture, dust-covered boxes, and something else, a lingering sense of dread. Amanda, seemingly unfazed, began rummaging through the boxes, pulling out old trinkets and laughing at their oddity. I stood back, feeling increasingly uneasy. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, and I could hear my heart thumping louder than ever. Suddenly, Amanda froze, her hand hovering over a small, ornate box. She looked at me, her eyes wide with excitement. I could feel the tension in the air shift, and something deep inside me screamed to leave. But I stayed rooted to the spot, curiosity getting the better of me. She opened the box, revealing an assortment of antique jewelry, tarnished and forgotten. As she lifted a delicate necklace, the bulb above us flickered violently, plunging us into darkness. Panic surged through me. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam of light revealed Amanda's face, but it was different. Her expression had changed, her smile now twisted and unnatural. I felt a shiver run down my spine as she began to whisper something, her voice low and eerie. The words were indecipherable, but they felt like a chant, weaving through the air, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. I stepped back, my heart racing. The atmosphere was thick with something otherworldly, and I could feel a presence creeping closer. I turned to leave, but Amanda grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. She was no longer the girl I had met on Tinder. She had transformed into something dark and twisted. My mind was racing, trying to process what was happening. I had always enjoyed ghost stories, but this was no longer a story. It was my reality. With a sudden burst of strength, I yanked my arm free and sprinted up the stairs, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear Amanda's laughter echoing behind me, a chilling sound that sent a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. I burst through the front door and into the cool night air, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I jumped into my car, slamming the door shut, my hands trembling as I fumbled to start the engine. As I sped away, the house receding in the rearview mirror, I tried to shake off the dread that clung to me, but a nagging thought settled in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had left something behind, something important. I glanced at my phone, and my heart dropped. There was a new message from Amanda, timestamped just seconds after I had left the house. I hesitated before opening it, my hands shaking. The message read, "You can't escape me. I'm always watching." I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just a ghost story, it was a warning. In that moment, I realized the truth. The real horror wasn't the haunted house or the ghostly whispers. It was the realization that Amanda had never been who she claimed to be. I had matched with a stranger, and now she was closer than I could ever imagine. I had always been a bit skeptical about dating apps, but as my friends raved about their recent romances, I figured, why not give it a shot? It was late autumn. The leaves were swirling in vibrant shades of orange and brown, and I was feeling a little lonely. So, there I was, swiping through profiles on Tinder, half-heartedly judging faces and bios while sipping on a pumpkin spice latte. That's when I stumbled upon her, an alluring girl named Lily. Her profile was simple yet captivating. A couple of selfies that showcased her radiant smile and a bio that read, "Looking for something real, not just a fling." It felt refreshing amidst the sea of cliché lines and filtered selfies. I swiped right, and to my surprise, we matched. The notifications pinged, and my heart raced a little. Our initial chat was lighthearted, full of banter and laughter. She had this magnetic energy that drew me in. We talked about everything under the sun, our favorite movies, music, and even our childhood memories. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and I couldn't help but feel a connection growing between us. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet up in person. She suggested a quaint little coffee shop downtown, a cozy spot with vintage decor and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air. The day arrived, and I was both excited and nervous. I arrived early, scanning the place for anyone who might resemble Lily. My heart sank a little when I noticed how packed it was. People were huddled in corners, engrossed in their own worlds. Then I spotted her. She was sitting at a small table near the window, her hair cascading over her shoulders, and a book resting on her lap. She looked even more stunning in person. As I walked over, I felt a strange unease settle in my stomach. Something about the way she was staring out the window felt off, like she was lost in a different world. I brushed it off as nerves, but as we started talking, the feeling lingered. The conversation continued, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was only half present. Her eyes would occasionally dart around the room, and she seemed distracted, like she was waiting for something or someone. Despite the odd vibe, I pushed through. We shared some laughs, and the initial awkwardness faded a bit. However, as the evening wore on, I couldn't help but notice her behavior becoming more erratic. She would suddenly change the topic or laugh at things that didn't seem funny. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself that she was just nervous too. After a couple of hours, we decided to leave the coffee shop. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the streets were now illuminated by flickering streetlights, casting eerie shadows. There was a chill in the air, and I suggested we walk around the nearby park. She agreed, but her demeanor shifted again. The way she looked around, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sweater, it was unsettling. As we meandered through the park, I felt an overwhelming urge to ask what was bothering her. I had this gut feeling that something wasn't right, but I hesitated. Instead, I made small talk, trying to keep the mood light. But as we approached a dimly lit area, she suddenly stopped, her gaze fixed on a nearby tree, and I followed her line of sight. Nothing was there, just a couple of squirrels scurrying about. Then, without warning, she turned to me, her eyes wide with fear, as if she'd seen a ghost. I asked her what was wrong, and she hesitated before whispering, "Do you feel like someone is watching us?" The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I glanced around, but the park was empty. I laughed it off, trying to ease her tension, but her expression didn't change. The atmosphere grew heavier, and I felt the creeping sensation of dread settle in. We continued walking, but every few steps, she would glance back, her breathing becoming more rapid. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her it was just her imagination, but the unease gnawed at me. Then, just as we reached a small bridge over a creek, she stopped again, staring into the water. Her reflection rippled, distorting her features, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something shift in her expression, something dark and twisted. My heart raced as I asked her what was going on, but she merely shook her head, her eyes glazed over. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed behind us. I turned my head, my stomach dropping. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall man wearing a hooded jacket, his face obscured. I could feel panic rising in my chest. I grabbed Lily's arm, urging her to move, but she stood frozen, staring at the man as if she were entranced. "Lily, let's go," I said firmly, but she didn't budge. The man stepped closer, his shadow looming over us, and I could see his eyes glinting in the dim light. They were cold and hollow, devoid of any warmth. "Lily," I urged again, pulling her away, but she remained still, her gaze locked on the stranger. "Do you know him?" I asked, bewildered. She didn't respond. Instead, she took a step forward, almost as if she were compelled to approach him. I felt a surge of fear and confusion, my instincts screaming for me to run. Just as I was about to yank her back, a sharp laugh erupted from the man. It was low and sinister, echoing in the stillness of the park. "You shouldn't have come here, Lily," he said, his voice sending chills down my spine. In that moment, everything shifted. Lily's expression changed from fear to something almost sinister, a smirk creeping onto her lips. It was as if a mask had been lifted, revealing a side of her I had never seen. "You never told him, did you?" she said, her voice dripping with malice. I felt my heart drop, This wasn't the girl I had been chatting with online, the one who had seemed so genuine and sweet. I stumbled back, confusion and horror swirling in my mind. The man stepped closer, and I could see the two of them share a knowing glance. It was like they were in on a joke that I wasn't part of. My instincts kicked in, and I turned to run, my heart pounding in my ears as I sprinted back down the path. I could hear their laughter echoing behind me, a haunting melody that chased me through the darkening park. I didn't stop running until I reached my apartment, slamming the door shut behind me. My breath came in ragged gasps as I leaned against the door, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The girl who had captured my attention, who I thought might bring some light into my life, had turned out to be someone, or something, completely different. I sat on my couch, staring at my phone, the Tinder app still open. I couldn't help but scroll back to her profile, but it was gone. Her account had vanished as if it never existed. The laughter echoed in my mind, and I realized that I had been drawn into something far more sinister than a simple date. It was then that I understood. I wasn't just a victim of a bad Tinder date. I had stumbled upon something dark, something lurking in the shadows of the digital world, waiting to ensnare unsuspecting souls. And the worst part, I knew I'd never feel safe swiping again. I always thought Tinder was just a way to meet new people, maybe grab a drink or two, but I never expected it to take me down a path that felt like it was straight out of a horror movie. So, there I was, swiping through profiles on a rainy Friday night in a small town where everyone seemed to know everyone. It was the kind of night where the rain drummed against the window, casting shadows that danced in the dim light of my living room. My friends had convinced me to give a shot, saying that it would be fun to meet someone new and possibly find a connection. Little did I know, that connection would lead me to something I never wanted to find. Scrolling through the app, most profiles were your typical fare: gym selfies, cute dogs, and overly enthusiastic quotes about living life to the fullest. But then I stumbled across a profile that caught my attention. His name was Jake, and his bio was simple but intriguing. Let's get off our phones and into the real world. I found myself drawn to his rugged look. The way his smile seemed to have a hint of mischief. I swiped right, and to my surprise, it was an instant match. We began chatting, and Jake seemed charming, witty, and confident. Each message was like a spark, igniting a curiosity within me. It felt refreshing, a break from the mundane conversations I'd had before. He didn't waste any time asking me out, suggesting a secluded coffee shop on the edge of town. It sounded quaint, and I was excited, even if a little nervous. I agreed, knowing that my friends would be on standby, ready to rescue me if things went sideways. The day of our date was overcast, the clouds hanging low, making the world feel a bit more claustrophobic. As I drove to the coffee shop, an unsettling feeling crept up my spine. It was as if the universe was sending me signals that I was ignoring. The shop was located in an old building that looked like it had seen better days, with chipped paint and a flickering sign. I parked and took a deep breath, trying to shake off the apprehension that clung to me. Inside, the air was thick with the rich smell of coffee and baked goods, but it was the atmosphere that made me uneasy. The place was almost empty, save for a couple sitting in the corner and an elderly man reading a newspaper. I spotted Jake immediately. He was seated at a small table in the back, his eyes scanning the room. When he saw me, a broad smile broke across his face. I felt a flutter of excitement mixed with anxiety. As I approached, I couldn't help but notice how his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. There was something in his gaze, something I couldn't quite put my finger on, but it sent a shiver down my spine. We exchanged pleasantries, and as we talked, I tried to focus on his words, but my mind was racing. The conversation flowed easily at first, but I could sense an undercurrent of something darker. He talked about his life, his interests, but the way he described them made me feel uneasy. He had a penchant for the macabre, often referencing things like dark literature and horror films in a way that felt too intense for a first date. My internal alarm bells were ringing, but I pushed through, convincing myself that it was just nerves. After all, it wasn't uncommon for people to have eccentric interests. As we finished our drinks, Jake suggested a walk in the nearby park. I hesitated but agreed. The park was eerily quiet, the path winding through trees that loomed overhead, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. I felt exposed, like the shadows were whispering secrets I wasn't privy to. Jake kept talking, his voice low and enticing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was lurking in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to pounce. As we walked, I noticed a small, dilapidated gazebo tucked away in a corner of the park. It looked abandoned, overgrown with weeds. Jake's eyes lit up as he suggested we check it out. I hesitated, feeling a rush of adrenaline mixed with fear, but there was something magnetic about him that pulled me in. Inside the gazebo, the ambience shifted. The air was heavy, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. Jake leaned against one of the wooden posts, his demeanor changing subtly. He began to speak about fear, how it could be exhilarating, and how some people lived for it. I felt my heart race, my instincts screaming at me to leave, but curiosity held me captive. He pulled out his phone and showed me a video, a grainy clip of a group of friends exploring an abandoned house, laughing and joking until something went horribly wrong. I felt a chill run down my spine as I watched. The footage ended abruptly with screams, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. I tried to laugh it off, but Jake's eyes were glued to mine, intense and piercing. It felt like he was studying me, searching for something beneath my surface. I wanted to look away, to escape the weight of his gaze, but I couldn't. It was as if he had cast a spell over me, drawing me deeper into his twisted world. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. A rustle in the bushes caused me to jump, my heart pounding in my chest. Jake laughed, but it felt hollow, echoing in the quiet of the park. I backed away, feeling the urge to run, but he stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. His words felt like a warm breath against my ear, sending a jolt of fear through me. I didn't want to stay there any longer. I excused myself, saying I had to go. The return walk felt endless, every shadow stretching out like claws ready to grab me. I glanced back at him, standing alone in the gazebo, his smile fading into something darker. Once I reached my car, I slammed the door shut, relief washing over me as I locked it. I started the engine, but even as I drove away, I could feel his eyes on me. I didn't dare look back, my heart racing as I navigated the winding roads, desperate to leave that park behind. A couple of days passed, and I thought about Jake often, unable to shake the feeling of dread he left me with. I debated deleting the app entirely, but decided to check my messages one last time. As I opened the conversation, I saw a new message from him. My heart dropped as I read the words, which felt like a chilling echo of our date. I hope you enjoyed our little adventure. I have something special planned for us next time. A wave of nausea hit me. I couldn't ignore the implications of those words. It was as if he was toying with me, and I felt trapped, like a fly caught in a web. I quickly unmatched him, my hands trembling as I did so, but the unease didn't leave me. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard a noise outside my window. My heart raced as I turned to look, half expecting to see Jake standing there, watching me. But there was nothing, just the shadows moving in the moonlight. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but sleep eluded me. Weeks passed without incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I stopped using Tinder and avoided the park entirely. Then one evening, as I was scrolling through social media, I came across a post that made my blood run cold. It was an article about a string of disappearances in small towns across the state. The chilling detail was the last known location of the victims, an abandoned house, eerily similar to the one Jake had shown me in that video. My heart sank as I remembered his words about fear and adventure. I had brushed it off as dark humor, but now it felt like a warning. Panic gripped me as I realized I had narrowly escaped becoming one of those victims. That night, as I locked all the doors and pulled the curtains tight, I felt a sense of relief. I had escaped, but the dread still lingered. I thought I was safe, but then I heard a soft knock at my door. My heart raced as I hesitated, fear gripping my chest. I approached the door cautiously and peered through the peephole, my stomach dropping when I saw Jake standing there, that same chilling smile plastered across his face. I backed away, my breath quickening as I frantically searched for my phone to call for help. But as I turned, I felt a cold breeze sweep through the room, and I knew I wasn't alone anymore. The last thing I remember was the darkness closing in around me, and the realization that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones that don't stay behind the screen. I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through Tinder like it was my lifeline. It was one of those late-night sessions where the world outside my window blurred into a backdrop of flickering streetlights and distant sirens. My apartment was dim, lit only by the glow of my phone screen. I'd been single for a while, and honestly, I was just looking for something to break the boredom. Swiping left on a barrage of faces felt almost meditative, a way to escape the monotony of my everyday life. That's when I stumbled upon her profile. Her name was Emma. The pictures were pretty standard: a cute smile, a couple of selfies with friends, and one stunning shot where she looked like she just stepped off a magazine cover. But there was something about her that gave me pause. It wasn't just her looks. It was the way she held her gaze in the photos, like she was staring right into the camera, piercing through whatever facade I might have been putting up. I swiped right, and to my surprise, we matched almost instantly. We started chatting, and it was easy. She seemed down-to-earth, funny, the kind of girl you could sit with for hours and not realize how much time had passed. We shared stories, our likes and dislikes, and before long, we were planning to meet up. There was a coffee shop downtown that I loved, a little hole-in-the-wall place with mismatched furniture and the best mocha lattes. It felt like a perfect first date. The day of our meeting came, and I was a bundle of nerves and excitement. I picked out my favorite shirt, the one that made me feel confident, and double-checked my hair in the mirror before heading out. The city was buzzing with life, and the air was crisp as I walked to the coffee shop, the autumn leaves crunching under my feet. I arrived early, the bell above the door jingling as I stepped inside. I grabbed a table by the window, my heart racing as I sipped on my drink, scanning the street for her. When she finally walked in, I felt my breath catch. Emma was even more stunning in person. She wore a simple black dress that hugged her figure perfectly, and her hair cascaded in soft waves down her shoulders. As she spotted me, her face lit up with a smile that made my heart skip a beat. I stood up, and we exchanged hugs, the brief contact sending an unexpected jolt through me. We talked and laughed, losing track of time as the sun dipped lower in the sky. But as the evening rolled in, I noticed something odd. She would occasionally glance at her phone, her expression shifting as if she was receiving messages that unsettled her. I brushed it off as typical day jitters, but a shadow of unease hung in the air. As we finished our drinks, she suggested we take a walk through a nearby park. I agreed, thinking it would be a perfect way to continue our conversation. The park was beautiful, with twinkling fairy lights strung through the trees and the sound of laughter echoing from a distance. But as we strolled deeper into the park, the laughter faded and the atmosphere shifted. The trees loomed overhead, their branches casting strange shadows that danced in the dim light. I tried to keep the mood light, but Emma seemed distracted, her eyes darting around as if she was searching for something or someone. I asked her if she was okay, but she brushed it off with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. That's when I noticed a figure at a distance, cloaked in shadows. My heart raced as I squinted, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was a man, standing still, watching us. I felt a chill creep down my spine. I turned back to Emma, but she wasn't looking at me. Her gaze was fixed on the figure, a mix of fear and recognition washing over her face. I grabbed her hand, trying to pull her away, but she hesitated. The man stepped into the light, and I could see his face, a sharp jaw, piercing eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. "Let's go," I urged, but Emma was frozen, her expression a blend of horror and something else I couldn't place. The man took a step closer, his lips curling into a menacing smile. Suddenly, Emma snapped out of it and yanked her hand from mine. She turned to me, and in that instant, I saw a shift in her demeanor. Her eyes darkened, and her voice turned cold. "You need to leave. Now." Confusion washed over me, but before I could respond, she was already moving toward the man. My instincts kicked in, and I grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "What are you doing?" I shouted, panic rising in my throat, but she looked at me as if I were a stranger. "You don't understand. I can't let him find me." The man took another step forward, and I realized I had no idea what I was caught up in. Fear gripped me, and I turned to run, dragging Emma with me. We sprinted through the park, the laughter of children now replaced with an eerie silence. I could hear footsteps behind us, heavy and relentless. As we burst out of the park, the streetlights flickered, casting an ominous glow. I pulled out my phone to call for help, but the screen went black. Panic surged through me as I realized I was cut off from the outside world. I glanced back to see the man had stopped at the park entrance, watching us with an unsettling calm. "Let's get to my apartment," I shouted, and she nodded, her face pale but determined. We ran down the street, my heart pounding in my chest as I fumbled with my keys to unlock the door. Once inside, I slammed it shut and locked it, breathing heavily as I slid down to the floor, trying to process what just happened. Emma leaned against the wall, her hands trembling. "He can't get in here," I said, trying to reassure both of us, but the look in her eyes told me she was far from convinced. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the distant hum of traffic outside. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that hung in the air. Emma suddenly stood up, pacing the small space. "You don't understand. He's been looking for me for a long time. I thought I was safe." I frowned, trying to piece together what she meant. Safe from what? She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear, and then turned away. "I need to tell you something. It's why I was so nervous on our date. I've been on the run." Before she could explain further, there was a loud knock on the door, making us both jump. My heart raced as I glanced at her, fear evident in her eyes. "It's him," she whispered. I held my breath as the knocking grew more aggressive, the sound echoing through my apartment. "What do we do?" I asked, panic creeping into my voice. Emma stepped closer to me, her face taut with tension. "You need to trust me. When I say to run, you run." I nodded, my mind racing. The knocking continued, and I felt a sense of impending doom settle in my stomach. Emma took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. "Now," we dashed toward the back window, but just as we reached it, the door burst open, and the man stepped inside. But instead of the menacing figure I had expected, he stood there with a strange calmness, a knowing smile on his face. Emma froze, her eyes widening in recognition, as the man spoke softly, almost tenderly. "It's time to come home." I looked between them, completely bewildered. Emma's expression shifted from fear to something I couldn't quite read. Relief? Acceptance? "What do you mean?" I stammered, still processing the chaos of the moment. The man tilted his head, his smile widening. "She's been running from her true self, but she doesn't need to anymore." And just like that, the tension shattered. Emma stepped forward, her demeanor changing entirely. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this," she said, her voice now steady. "But I need to go with him." I was left standing there, my mind racing as they walked toward each other. The man extended his hand, and Emma took it, a serene smile replacing the fear on her face. They turned to leave, and I felt a rush of confusion and betrayal. As they stepped out of my apartment, the door swung shut behind them, leaving me in stunned silence. I was left alone, the world outside continuing on, completely oblivious to the horror show that had just unfolded. I sat there for a long time, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Emma, the girl I thought I was getting to know, had been living a life I couldn't even begin to understand. I glanced at my phone, the screen flickering back to life, and I felt the weight of 1,000 questions pressing down on me. What had I just witnessed? And more importantly, who was Emma really? The answers felt just out of reach, but one thing was certain. The Tinder profile that had sparked this whole nightmare was just the beginning of a story I would never forget. I leaned back against the wall, the quiet of my apartment now feeling oppressive, and I realized that sometimes the scariest monsters weren't the ones lurking in the shadows, but the ones who looked just like us. I had always been a bit skeptical about online dating. I mean, who really finds love swiping on an app? But after a few months of lonely nights and endless scrolling through the same tired faces, I found myself on Tinder. It was a Friday night, and my friends had convinced me that it was time to at least give it a shot. I downloaded the app, created a profile, and started swiping. At first, it was just the usual mix of guys, some cute, some funny, and a lot of them just plain weird. Then I came across his profile. His name was Alex, and his pictures were striking. He had this intense gaze that seemed to pull you in, and a smile that was both charming and mysterious. His bio was short but intriguing, mentioning a love for the outdoors and horror movies. I swiped right, and to my surprise, we matched almost immediately. We started chatting, and the connection was instant. His messages were clever and engaging, filled with dark humor that resonated with me. I felt like I had known him forever. We talked about everything: our favorite horror films, childhood fears, and the creepiest places we had ever visited. There was something magnetic about him, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than met the eye. After a few days of texting, he suggested we meet up. There was a small, isolated cabin in the woods, he said, where we could enjoy a quiet weekend away from a city. My heart raced at the thought of it. It sounded like the perfect setting for a horror movie, and part of me loved the thrill of that. I hesitated only for a moment before saying yes. Fast forward to that weekend. I packed my bag with just the essentials: a few clothes, snacks, and my trusty flashlight. The drive to the cabin was eerie, with the trees looming over the narrow road like silent sentinels. I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety bubbling in my stomach. What if he wasn't who he said he was? What if he turned out to be some psychotic killer? But those thoughts were quickly dismissed as I approached the cabin. It was small, rustic, and nestled deep in the woods. As I stepped out of the car, the air felt thick and heavy, almost as if the forest was alive and watching me. I shook off the feeling and walked up to the door. Alex greeted me with a warm smile, and my worries melted away. The inside of the cabin was cozy, with a crackling fire and the smell of pine filling the air. We spent the evening talking, sharing stories, and laughing over a game of cards. The night wore on, and as the fire dimmed, so did the light in the room. Shadows danced on the walls, and I couldn't help but feel a chill creeping down my spine. As we settled down for the night, I noticed something odd. There were old photographs hanging on the walls, but they weren't just random pictures. They were black and white photos of people, families, couples, and individuals, staring back at me with vacant expressions. It was unsettling. I asked Alex about them, but he brushed it off, saying they were just remnants from the cabin's past. I tried to dismiss it, focusing instead on the warmth of the fire and the comfort of his presence. But sleep didn't come easy. I tossed and turned, listening to the sounds of the woods outside. The wind howled, branches scraped against the cabin, and I could swear I heard whispers. I sat up in bed, heart racing, and glanced over at Alex, who was sound asleep. That's when I heard it again, a low, almost inaudible voice, like someone was speaking just outside the cabin. I strained to listen, my heart pounding. It sounded like my name being called, soft yet urgent. I thought I was imagining things, but the voice continued, and I felt an overwhelming urge to check it out. I quietly slipped out of bed and, grabbing my flashlight, made my way to the door. The beam of light cut through the darkness as I stepped outside. The night air was cold, and the forest was eerily silent. The whispers faded, but my instinct screamed at me to turn back. Yet, curiosity got the better of me. I wandered a few paces into the woods, my flashlight flickering against the trees. The shadows grew longer, and the darkness seemed to close in around me. That's when I saw it, an old, dilapidated structure that looked like it had once been a cabin, much like the one I was staying in. The door hung ajar, and I felt a pull toward it, as if something inside was calling me. I stepped closer, the beam of my flashlight revealing more of the structure. The windows were shattered, and the walls were covered in strange symbols and markings. It felt wrong, like stepping into another world. My heart raced, and I turned to head back, but something caught my eye, a figure standing at the edge of the trees, watching me. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. The figure was shrouded in shadows, but I could make out the outline of a person, their face obscured. Panic surged through me, and I turned to run back to the cabin. I burst through the door, slamming it behind me. Alex was sitting up in bed, concern etched on his face. I tried to explain what had happened, but as I spoke, I noticed something strange. The photographs on the wall had changed. The faces were now twisted, contorted in expressions of horror and despair. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Alex's demeanor shifted, his smile fading into something more sinister. He stood up, his movements slow and deliberate. I took a step back, fear flooding my veins. He reached for me, and I dodged, backing away. The cabin felt smaller, the walls closing in as I realized I was trapped. The whispers returned, louder now, echoing in my mind. They were no longer just voices. They were pleas for help, cries of terror. I ran for the door, but it wouldn't budge. I turned to Alex, who was now standing too close, his eyes dark and hollow. It was as if he was no longer the person I had met on Tinder. The charming facade had fallen away, revealing something much darker. I remembered the photographs, the stories he told, the way he always seemed to know just a little too much about me. Every conversation, every laugh, felt like a carefully crafted illusion. I was just another name, another face to add to his collection. In a moment of desperation, I grabbed the fireplace poker and swung it at him, my instincts kicking in. He dodged with surprising agility, laughter spilling from his lips like poison. "Did you really think you could escape?" he taunted, his voice low and chilling. The forest outside seemed to respond, a howl of wind cutting through the silence. The whispers crescendoed into a cacophony, drowning out everything else. I fought my way back toward the window, shattering the glass and climbing through. The cold air hit me like a slap, and I stumbled into the darkness, running blindly into the woods. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps echoing against the trees, the laughter following me like a ghost. I ran and ran, branches scratching at my skin, the ground uneven beneath my feet. I didn't stop until I reached the road, gasping for breath, heart racing. I turned back, half expecting to see him emerge from the shadows, but he was gone. I made it back to my car, adrenaline surging through me. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and for a fleeting moment, I saw him standing in the middle of the road, a smile plastered across his face. I never went back to Tinder. I still think about that night, about the cabin in the woods, and the man who had captivated me with his charm only to reveal a darkness I couldn't comprehend. It was a lesson learned, but not in the way I expected. In the end, I realized that some connections are better left unmade, and some stories are better left untold. I had just moved to the city, and like anyone else trying to meet people, I jumped on Tinder. Scrolling through profiles became a nightly habit, a way to escape the loneliness of my new apartment. It was a typical Friday night when I swiped right on a guy named Ethan. He had that kind of smile that seemed genuine, the kind that made you think, yeah, he's probably not a total creep. We matched almost instantly, and the chat started off typical, small talk about our favorite movies and music. But there was something different about Ethan. He had a way of weaving his words that drew me in, making me feel like I was the only person in the world. As the hours ticked by, I found myself sharing more than I ever planned. My fears, dreams, even the stupid little quirks that I usually kept to myself. The way he responded made it feel like he was genuinely interested, like he was hanging on my every word. After a few days of chatting, he suggested we meet up. I hesitated, feeling a twinge of caution. I had heard too many horror stories about people getting catfished or worse, but something about Ethan made me feel safe. Maybe it was the way he remembered the little things I shared, or how he made me laugh. So, I agreed to meet him at a small cafe downtown, a cozy spot with dim lighting and a warm atmosphere. The day of our date was rainy, the kind of weather that makes you want to curl up with a blanket and binge watch a series. But I put on my favorite sweater, hoping it would boost my confidence, and headed out. The cafe was buzzing with chatter, the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air. I arrived early, sitting at a small table near the window, nervously fiddling with my phone. I was excited but also anxious, wondering if my instincts had failed me. When Ethan walked in, my heart raced. He looked even better in person, his dark hair slightly damp from the rain, and that same warm smile on his face. We exchanged awkward hellos before diving into conversation. For the first hour, everything felt perfect. We laughed and shared stories, the chemistry between us undeniable. But then something shifted. The cafe was crowded, and the noise around us faded as we lost ourselves in each other's eyes. I noticed a flicker of something in Ethan's demeanor, a shadow crossing his face when he spoke about his family. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it made me uneasy. I brushed it off, attributing it to nerves. As the night wore on, I began to feel a strange tension in the air. The cafe, which had once felt warm, now seemed stifling. I could see the barista behind the counter, her eyes darting to a table in the corner where a man sat alone, staring at us. I tried to shake the feeling off, convincing myself I was being paranoid. After all, it was a public place, and I was with Ethan. After finishing our drinks, we decided to take a walk in the nearby park. The rain had stopped, leaving the world glistening under the streetlights. It was beautiful, but with the beauty came an unsettling chill. I kept glancing back at the cafe, half expecting to see the man still watching us. Ethan seemed oblivious, engrossed in conversation, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed. As we walked deeper into the park, I started to feel trapped. The trees loomed overhead, their branches resembling skeletal fingers reaching out towards us. I picked up my pace, trying to keep my anxiety at bay. Ethan noticed my change in mood and reached for my hand, reassuring me with a gentle squeeze. I wanted to believe everything was fine, but the shadowy figure from the cafe kept creeping into my mind. We found a bench nestled beneath a large oak tree, and I sat down, trying to steady my breathing. Ethan began talking about his childhood, his eyes sparkling with nostalgia. I wanted to focus on his words, but I couldn't help but feel a presence lingering nearby. I turned to look around, and there he was, the man from the cafe, standing a few yards away, watching us intently. My heart raced. I leaned closer to Ethan, whispering about the guy. He turned to look, but the man had already stepped back into the shadows, blending into the darkness. "You're just being paranoid," Ethan said, but I could see the concern in his eyes. We decided it was best to head back, and as we walked, I felt a growing sense of dread. The street seemed deserted, the eerie silence amplifying the sound of our footsteps. I kept glancing back, half expecting the man to reappear, but he didn't. I tried to shake it off, focusing on Ethan's warm laughter as he recounted a funny story about his dog. As we reached my building, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. I didn't want the night to end, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. We stood outside for a moment, the streetlight casting a soft glow around us. I could feel the weight of Ethan's gaze, and when he leaned in to kiss me, it felt electric. For a brief moment, I forgot about the lurking fear. But just as our lips met, a loud crash echoed from the nearby alley. We jumped apart, and I felt a surge of adrenaline rush through me. My heart pounded as I peered into the darkness, trying to see what had caused the noise. Ethan grabbed my hand, pulling me close, but the moment felt different now, tinged with urgency. We hurried inside the building, and I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking. The hallway felt long, the shadows stretching ominously as I opened my apartment door. I stepped inside, and just as I turned to say goodbye, I saw Ethan's face change. His eyes darkened, and his smile faded, morphing into something unsettling. Suddenly, he stepped closer, invading my personal space. I felt the air thicken, a chill creeping down my spine. "You should really be careful about who you trust," he said, his voice low and menacing. My stomach dropped as realization washed over me. This wasn't the charming guy I had been talking to for days. This was someone else entirely. Before I could react, he lunged toward me, but I instinctively slammed the door shut, locking it just in time. I heard him pounding on the other side, his voice morphing into a rage I never expected. "You think you can just walk away? You have no idea who I really am." My heart raced as I backed away from the door, my mind racing. I felt trapped, the adrenaline coursing through my veins, but I had to think. I grabbed my phone, ready to call for help, but as I turned back to the door, I caught a glimpse of the man from the cafe standing at the end of the hallway, watching me. In that moment, it struck me. The man wasn't just following us. He was part of something larger, a twisted game I had unknowingly stepped into. But I had to focus on escaping. I rushed to the window, throwing it open just as Ethan's pounding grew more aggressive. I could hear him screaming now, the rage turning into desperation. With my heart in my throat, I climbed out onto the fire escape, my hands trembling as I descended into the night. I didn't look back, not wanting to see what might happen if I did. The city felt alive around me, but in that moment, all I could think about was getting away. Just as I reached the ground, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see the man from the cafe coming closer, his expression unreadable. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I was frozen, caught in the psychotic twist of fate that had unfolded. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. In that moment, I realized he wasn't there to hurt me. He was here to protect me, to save me from Ethan. The world spun around me, the night filled with confusion and terror. I didn't know who to trust anymore. But just as I opened my mouth to speak, I heard Ethan's voice from above, rage pouring from his lips. "You can't escape me." In that instant, everything clicked. I realized the twisted game was never about romance. It was about control. And as the rain began to fall again, drenching the scene in darkness, I knew I had to choose. Trust a stranger or go back to the devil I thought I knew. In a city filled with shadows and secrets, I was left standing at the crossroads of my own survival. I never thought swiping right would lead me to something so twisted. It all started on a cold October night when the leaves crunched beneath my feet and the air felt heavy with impending dread. I was scrolling through Tinder, half-heartedly searching for a distraction from my mundane life. My friend said finding love online was all the rage, but I just wanted a little excitement, something to break the monotony of my boring routine. That's when I came across his profile. His name was Mason. He had this brooding look, dark hair that fell over his forehead just right, and a smirk that hinted at secrets. His bio was short but intriguing, looking for someone who can handle the dark. I felt a little thrill run through me. I swiped right, and to my surprise, we matched almost instantly. I didn't even think twice before messaging him. Our conversation flowed surprisingly well. He had this knack for making the ordinary sound mysterious. He'd talk about his passion for photography, how he loved capturing the shadows in abandoned buildings or the quiet of the woods at night. I could almost feel the chill of those places through his words. As the night wore on, I found myself captivated by his stories, hanging on every word. At the same time, though, something felt off. It was as if he was drawing me in with an invisible thread, and I was too intrigued to pull away. After a few days of chatting, Mason suggested we meet up. He wanted to take me to this old, run-down cabin he said was perfect for a photo shoot. The cabin was deep in the woods, away from everything, and the idea sent a thrill through me. Maybe I was a little reckless, but I felt this strange pull toward him. I agreed, and we set a time for that Saturday afternoon. The drive to the cabin was uneventful, but the further I went, the thicker the trees grew, looming over the narrow road like silent guardians. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and apprehension as I rolled up to the cabin. It looked like something straight out of a horror movie. Weathered wood, broken windows, and vines creeping up the sides as if trying to reclaim it from the earth. I parked my car, taking a deep breath before stepping out into the crisp air. Mason was already there, leaning against his car, looking as enigmatic as ever. He greeted me with that smirk, and I felt a flutter in my stomach. We exchanged pleasantries, but I could sense something lurking beneath the surface. He led me inside, and as we stepped over the threshold, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. The cabin was dark, the only light coming from the gaps in the boarded-up windows. Dust hung in the air, and I instinctively reached for my phone, realizing I hadn't had service for miles. He set up his camera in the corner, moving with a certain grace that made me forget my unease. Mason wanted to capture the essence of the cabin, the way the fading light fell against the decay. I played along, posing in the dim light, trying to shake off the feeling that something wasn't quite right. He snapped pictures, and I could feel his gaze on me, intense and searching. As the sun began to set, casting eerie shadows across the room, Mason suggested we explore the surrounding area. I hesitated at first, but curiosity got the better of me. The woods felt alive, the crunch of leaves underfoot echoing like whispers. We wandered deeper, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was as if the trees were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. I noticed Mason was quieter now, his focus shifting from the surroundings to me. We walked in silence for a while until we stumbled upon a clearing. It was beautiful, the moonlight filtering through the branches, but there was an unsettling feeling in the air. Mason pulled out his camera and began taking shots of the moonlit landscape. I waited, feeling the tension build as I looked around. The wind rustled through the trees, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. After a few minutes, Mason turned to me, that smirk back on his face. He said he had an idea for a photo that would really capture the moment. I was intrigued, and he gestured for me to step into the clearing. He took a few steps back, adjusting his camera, and I felt like I was in a dream, floating between reality and something darker. Then the atmosphere shifted. The calm, cool night suddenly felt oppressive. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, and I could hear a low rustling nearby. Mason's attention was entirely on his camera, and for a moment I felt alone in the vastness of the woods. Then I saw it, a figure lurking in the trees, half hidden behind the trunk of an ancient oak. My heart raced. Was it a trick of the light? My imagination? I called out to Mason, my voice trembling, but he didn't seem to hear me. I took a step back, my instinct screaming at me to run. The figure moved slightly, and I caught a glimpse of pale skin and dark, hollow eyes staring right at me. Panic surged through me as I turned to Mason, but he was still oblivious, lost in his world of photography. I took another step back, my breath quickening. The figure was coming closer now, moving silently, almost gliding through the trees. I screamed, finally breaking the spell that had wrapped around me. Mason snapped his head up, confusion etched on his face. But when he saw the look of terror in my eyes, he turned serious, scanning the woods. Suddenly, the figure lunged from the shadows, and I felt a rush of adrenaline. I grabbed Mason's arm, pulling him away from the clearing, my heart racing as we stumbled back toward the cabin. I could hear footsteps behind us, the sound of something heavy crashing through the underbrush. Mason finally grasped the gravity of the situation, his expression morphing from confusion to alarm. We ran, the cabin looming in the distance like a beacon of safety. I fumbled for the door, yanking it open and slamming it shut behind us. I locked it, my hand shaking, and Mason rushed to the window, peering out into the darkness. I could barely catch my breath as I turned to him, but the look on his face stopped me cold. He seemed different now, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. "You shouldn't have seen that," he said, his voice low and steady, devoid of the warmth it had held earlier. I felt my stomach drop as realization hit me. The stories he told, the way he spoke about darkness, it was like he had been preparing me for this moment. The figure in the woods wasn't an intruder. It was something he had summoned. My heart pounded as I desperately searched for an explanation. He stepped closer, a strange smile creeping across his lips as he watched me process the horror of it all. In that moment, I understood. Mason had wanted to capture more than just shadows. He was drawn to the darkness, and I had been a pawn in his twisted game. The cabin, the woods, it was all part of a setup, and I had walked right into it. I backed away, my mind racing as I fought the urge to scream. The door rattled, the figure outside now clawing at the wood as if trying to break in. Mason turned back to the window, a satisfied grin spreading across his face. "Don't worry. You'll make a beautiful picture." I stumbled back, my heart racing as I realized that I had to escape. The door wouldn't hold forever, and Mason was no longer the charming guy I had met online. He was something else entirely, and I was trapped in his deadly game. I stumbled onto Tinder one slow Saturday night, my usual weekend plans thwarted by a sudden rainstorm. The sound of raindrops tapping against my window felt oddly comforting, like nature's way of keeping me company. Swiping through profiles, I half-heartedly looked for someone to chat with, maybe even meet up with if the vibe was right. Most of the usual faces blurred together, filtered selfies, half-hearted bios, and that one guy who insisted on posing with a fish he caught. Then I saw him. His name was Jake, and he had an intense stare that seemed to pierce through the screen. His profile was simple, just a few sentences about loving adventure, a couple of outdoor shots, and a cryptic line about the thrill of the unknown. Honestly, it sent shivers down my spine, but in a good way. I swiped right, and to my surprise, it was an instant match. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed like we had known each other for ages. Jake was charming, funny, and just a little mysterious. He spoke about his love for exploring abandoned places, the thrill of urban exploration, and how he often found beauty in decay. There was something about his words that drew me in, a sense of excitement mixed with danger that made the mundane feel electric. As the hours slipped by, I felt a pull towards him that I couldn't quite explain. He suggested we meet up for a late-night adventure, exploring an old amusement park on the outskirts of town. My heart raced at the thought. Part of me was terrified, but another part was exhilarated. I could already picture the rusting rides, the overgrown paths, the thrill of stepping into the unknown. After a bit of back and forth, we agreed to meet at the park around midnight. I wasn't entirely sure what I was getting myself into, but something about Jake made me feel safe, even as the clock ticked closer to the witching hour. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed my flashlight, and headed out. The park loomed in the distance, a silhouette against the dark sky, its once vibrant colors now faded and peeling. The entrance was partially blocked by a chain-link fence, but a gap allowed me to slip through. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and rust, and an eerie silence settled around me, broken only by the distant sound of raindrops still falling. I stepped deeper into the park, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The ride stood like ghostly sentinels, abandoned Ferris wheel, a carousel frozen in time, and dilapidated food stalls that had long since succumbed to nature. It was beautiful in a haunting way. I felt a mix of excitement and dread, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling. Suddenly, my phone buzzed, startling me. It was a message from Jake. "Just arrived. Where are you?" I texted back my location, my heart racing at the thought of finally meeting him in person. But as I waited, the silence around me grew heavier, and a chill crept into the air. Minutes passed, and I felt an odd sense of unease. I scanned the area, gripping my flashlight tighter as shadows danced around me. It felt like I was being watched, but I shook off the feeling. Maybe it was just nerves. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw a figure emerge from the shadows, tall and cloaked in darkness. My heart pounded as I squinted to make out any details. It was a man, but he was not Jake. He stood still, a few feet away, his face obscured by the dim light. A wave of panic washed over me. "Jake!" I called out, my voice breaking the stillness. No answer. The man took a step forward, and I turned to run, my instincts screaming at me to get out. I darted toward the entrance, my breath quickening as I glanced back. The figure was following me, moving faster than I could have imagined. I bolted through the gap in the fence, adrenaline surging through my veins. The rain had picked up again, and I slipped on the wet ground, barely catching myself before I fell. I could hear him behind me, footsteps echoing in the night, a sinister reminder that I was not alone. Just as I thought I'd made it to safety, I felt a hand grip my shoulder. I spun around, ready to fight, but it was Jake. His familiar face was twisted in concern, but that relief quickly morphed into confusion as he looked at me, breathing heavily. "What's wrong?" he asked, scanning the darkness behind me. I struggled to catch my breath, trying to explain the man who had chased me. But as I glanced back, there was no one there. The park was silent once more, the only sound being the rain drumming against the ground. "I swear, he was right behind me," I stammered, feeling foolish as I spoke. Jake's expression shifted from worry to something darker, a flicker of something unrecognizable crossing his features. "Are you sure you weren't just imagining it?" he asked slowly, his voice even. I shook my head, the memory of the man too vivid to dismiss. But as I looked into Jake's eyes, doubt crept in. Had I really seen him? Jake's demeanor changed, a tense energy settling between us. "Let's just get out of here," he said, turning toward the entrance. I followed him, but my mind raced with questions. Who was that man? Why had he been after me? Outside the park, the rain poured down, soaking us instantly. I pulled my hoodie tighter around me, trying to shake off the chill that had settled deep in my bones. Jake walked beside me, but something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't know him as well as I thought. As we reached my car, I turned to thank him for coming out, but he wasn't looking at me. He was staring into the darkness of the park, a strange smile creeping across his face. "You know, it's funny," he said, his voice low. "You didn't even see him, did you?" My heart dropped as the realization hit me. He wasn't talking about the man who chased me. He was talking about the one who had been there all along. An icy chill gripped me as I turned to look back at the park, the shadows shifting ominously. Jake stepped closer, his expression shifting into something sinister. "You were the one I was waiting for," he whispered, his voice dripping with a chilling calm. In that moment, I understood. I had been lured into his trap, the thrill of adventure masking the reality of a dark game. My breath caught in my throat as I realized I wasn't the hunter. I was the prey. As I turned to run, the world around me dissolved into darkness, the rain washing away the last remnants of safety I thought I had. I was caught in a twisted game I never wanted to play. And now, the rules had changed. It started out like any normal Saturday night. I was scrolling through Tinder, mindlessly swiping, half engaged in a show I had on in the background. The glow of my phone lit up my face, shadows flickering in the dim light of my living room. I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship, and I was still adjusting to this new world of casual dating. I had been on a few dates, but nothing ever clicked. Just me, my half-eaten pizza, and my search for a little excitement. Then, I came across his profile. Jake was charming, with tousled hair and a smile that could light up the darkest room. His bio was simple yet intriguing. "Let's get lost together." I don't know what it was, but something about that line tugged at me. I swiped right, and within seconds we matched. The thrill of that little notification sent a spark through me, and I quickly sent him a message. We chatted for a while, the conversation flowing easily. He seemed different from the other guys I had talked to. There was a depth to him, a hint of mystery that I found compelling. He told me he loved exploring abandoned places, which instantly piqued my interest. I had always been fascinated by urban exploration, but had never found anyone who shared that passion. Jake suggested we meet up the next day at a local cafe to grab coffee before heading to an old, rumored-to-be haunted warehouse on the outskirts of town. I was hesitant at first. Meeting someone from an app in a secluded place felt risky, but I couldn't resist the allure of the adventure he promised. The next day, I found myself sitting at the cafe, nervously tapping my fingers on the table while glancing at the door. The barista had just brought me my coffee when Jake walked in. He looked even better in person, his smile wide, and his eyes sparkled with excitement. We exchanged pleasantries, and I could feel the chemistry between us growing as we chatted. He had a way of making the mundane feel extraordinary, and I was all in. After coffee, we hopped into his car, and the atmosphere shifted. The city gave way to the sprawling suburbs, then to stretches of dark, empty roads lined with trees. I could feel my heart racing, not just from excitement, but also from the creeping uncertainty of where we were headed. The warehouse loomed ahead, an imposing structure surrounded by overgrown weeds and crumbling brick. It looked like something straight out of a horror movie. Jake parked, and we stepped out into the cool evening air. The sun was setting, casting an eerie glow over everything, the shadows stretching across the ground like fingers reaching out. I hesitated for a moment, the thrill of adventure battling with an uneasy feeling in my gut. Jake noticed and flashed me an encouraging smile, assuring me it would be fine. My instincts told me to turn back, but curiosity got the better of me. As we approached the entrance, I could feel the chill in the air. The door creaked open, and we stepped inside. The darkness enveloped us, and I fumbled for my phone, using it as a flashlight. The beam illuminated the dusty floor and shattered glass littering the ground. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay. Jake led the way, pointing out old machinery and peeling paint, his excitement infectious. I began to relax, allowing myself to be swept up in the moment. We wandered deeper into the warehouse, our laughter echoing off the walls. Jake told me stories about the place, how it was once a thriving factory before it was abandoned. As we walked, I noticed strange markings on the walls, symbols I didn't recognize. They sent a shiver down my spine, but I brushed it off as my imagination running wild. Suddenly, we heard a loud crash from somewhere deeper within the building. My heart raced, and I instinctively grabbed Jake's arm. He laughed it off, insisting it was just the building settling. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. As we explored further, I could feel the atmosphere shift. The air grew colder, and an unsettling silence fell around us, broken only by the sound of our footsteps echoing. I wanted to turn back, but Jake seemed determined to go deeper. He led me down a narrow corridor, the walls closing in around us. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to check for notifications. Nothing, just a dead zone, which felt strange. We entered a large room, its vastness swallowing us whole. It was filled with old crates and debris, the remnants of a time long gone. In the far corner, something caught my eye, a flickering light. Jake noticed too and walked closer, curiosity etched on his face. As he approached, I felt a wave of dread wash over me. I called out to him, my voice trembling, but he didn't turn back. Then the light went out. In an instant, darkness enveloped us. Panic surged through me as I rushed toward Jake, my heart pounding in my chest. I could barely see in front of me, the shadows twisting and turning in the corners of my vision. I called for him again, my voice echoing in the silence. The only response was the sound of my own breathing, heavy and frantic. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the wall. My mind raced as I tried to process what was happening. Was this some sick joke? I pulled out my phone again, hoping the flashlight would work. But the screen was black, my phone was dead. The darkness felt alive, closing in on me, and I could hear my heartbeat echoing in my ears. Then, just as suddenly as it had gone out, the light flickered back on. I squinted, trying to adjust to the brightness. My eyes settled on Jake, standing at the far end of the room, his back to me. Relief washed over me at first, but something felt off. His posture was stiff, and he didn't move. I called out to him, but he remained silent. As I stepped closer, I noticed the flickering light came from something behind him, a strange, makeshift altar adorned with the symbols I had seen earlier. My heart dropped as I saw the remnants of offerings laid out: bones, trinkets, and what looked like photographs. Panic surged within me. I turned to leave, but the room felt like a maze, the shadows shifting around me, disorienting me. I finally found the corridor and ran, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear something behind me, shuffling, moving closer. I burst through the door and sprinted toward the entrance, my mind racing with thoughts of escape. Just as I reached the door, I felt a hand grab my shoulder, spinning me around. I screamed, but it was Jake. His face was pale, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something darker. He whispered something I couldn't hear over the pounding in my ears. I shoved past him, desperate for the exit. The moment I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me like a slap. I turned around, expecting to see him right behind me, but he stood in the doorway, a strange smile creeping across his face. I didn't understand until I saw the glint of something in his hand, a knife. A chilling realization sank in. This wasn't just a date, it had all been a trap. The adventure was a cover, and I had walked right into it. In that moment, every red flag I had ignored came rushing back. I turned to run, but he was faster, his laughter echoing in the night. I sprinted through the overgrown grass, adrenaline surging, my mind racing with the need to survive, not knowing if I would make out alive. The thrill of the night had turned into a nightmare, and all I could do was run. It started off as just another mundane night scrolling through Tinder. I was lounging on my couch, a bowl of popcorn in one hand and my phone in the other. It was a Friday, and while most of my friends were out partying, I was choosing to embrace my introverted side. Swiping left and right had become a mindless ritual, a way to fill the silence that echoed in my apartment. That's when I stumbled upon her profile. Her name was Clara, and her pictures were hauntingly beautiful. The first was a close-up of her striking green eyes, the kind that seemed to pierce straight through the screen. The second was a candid shot of her laughing, her long dark hair blowing in the wind. There was something magnetic about her, a vibe that made my heart race. We matched almost instantly, and I felt a rush of excitement. Her messages were engaging, filled with quirky humor and a touch of mystery that intrigued me. After an hour of banter, we decided to meet up. We agreed on a small cafe in the artsy part of town. As the night approached, my excitement morphed into a tinge of anxiety. I checked my reflection in the mirror more times than I cared to admit, adjusting my shirt, fixing my hair, and practicing my smile. The cafe had an intimate atmosphere, dimly lit with candles flickering on each table. A jazz band played softly in the corner, the notes swirling around the room like a gentle embrace. I arrived early, hoping to calm my nerves with a cup of coffee. The barista gave me a knowing smile as I ordered, clearly recognizing the telltale signs of a first date. I sat in a corner, glancing at the door every few minutes, wondering if she'd walk in with that enchanting smile. When she finally arrived, it was as if time slowed down. Clara stepped inside, her presence commanding the room. She wore a long, flowing dress that danced around her legs as she walked. Our eyes met, and that rush of adrenaline coursed through me again. We exchanged pleasantries, and I was struck by how easily our conversation flowed. We talked about everything from our favorite movies to the oddities of life in the city. But as the night progressed, I noticed something strange about her. Every time I mentioned a personal story, her eyes would flicker with the hint of something unsettling. It felt as if she was analyzing me, dissecting my words for hidden meanings. I tried to brush it off, chalking it up to my overactive imagination. After all, who doesn't have a bit of baggage? As the clock ticked away, I suggested we take a walk to stretch our legs. The cool night air hit me like a refreshing wave as we stepped outside. The streets were quieter now, the sounds of the city muffled in the distance. We wandered through the neighborhood, and Clara pointed out various art installations, her passion evident in the way she spoke. But the deeper we walked into the alleyways, the more I started to feel an unsettling vibe. The shadows began to stretch ominously, and the dim streetlights only offered flickers of reassurance. Clara led the way, her laughter echoing off the brick walls, but I could sense something lurking beneath the surface. It wasn't just her intense gaze. It was a feeling of being drawn into a world I wasn't prepared for. I tried to lighten the mood with jokes, but her laughter felt hollow, a mask that didn't quite fit. At one point, we reached an abandoned building that loomed ahead, its broken windows like gaping mouths. Clara stopped and looked back at me, her expression shifting to something serious. She suggested we explore it, and my heart dropped. I hesitated, feeling the weight of the decision hanging in the air. It was a bad idea, I thought, but the thrill of an adventure tugged at my curiosity. We stepped inside, and the atmosphere changed instantly. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of mildew and decay. The faint sound of dripping water echoed in the distance, creating an eerie melody that sent chills down my spine. Clara's excitement was palpable as she led the way, her silhouette dancing in the shadows. I followed, my instinct screaming at me to turn back, but I couldn't let fear dictate my actions. We wandered deeper into the building, the darkness wrapping around us like a thick blanket. Clara's laughter faded as we moved further inside, replaced by an unsettling silence that clung to my skin. The walls were covered in peeling paint and graffiti, remnants of a life long forgotten. I tried to make light of the situation, but my words felt hollow in the oppressive atmosphere. Suddenly, Clara stopped and turned to face me. She was inches away, her face illuminated by a sliver of moonlight streaming through a broken window. Her eyes were wide, reflecting a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. She leaned closer, and for a moment, I thought she was going to kiss me. But instead, she whispered something that sent a chill down my spine. "I can see into people's souls," she said, her voice low and intense. "I know what you're afraid of." I felt a knot form in my stomach. The way she stared at me, it was as if she were peeling back the layers of my mind, exposing all my insecurities. I forced a laugh, trying to shake off the unease. But my heart pounded, and I could feel the walls closing in around me. "Let's keep exploring," I suggested, desperate to break the tension. But as we moved deeper into the building, I could feel Clara's presence growing heavier. The air was thick with unspoken words, and the shadows seemed to twist and turn in response to her energy. We reached a large room at the back, and Clara paused again, her expression shifting to one of dawning realization. She looked at me, her gaze piercing. "You're not what I thought you were," she said, her tone a mixture of disappointment and intrigue. "What do you mean?" I asked, but her eyes were already distant, staring into the abyss of the room. I turned to follow her gaze and saw something that made my blood run cold. A series of mirrors lined the walls, each reflecting our images in distorted, fragmented ways. My heart raced as I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. Clara stepped closer to the mirrors, her fingers brushing against the glass. "You don't even know what you're capable of," she murmured, almost to herself. And in that moment, I realized that the person staring back at me wasn't the same person I thought I knew. The reflection was twisted, the eyes filled with shadows of my deepest fears. Panic surged through me, and I turned to leave, but Clara's hand shot out, gripping my wrist. "You can't run from yourself," she said, her voice echoing in the empty room. I tried to pull away, but her grip was unyielding. In that instant, I understood. Clara wasn't just a stranger. She was a manifestation of everything I had tried to bury deep within me. My insecurities, my regrets, my fears, they were all laid bare in front of me, and I couldn't escape. With a surge of adrenaline, I tore myself away from her grasp and bolted toward the exit. The darkness felt alive, closing in behind me as I raced through the hallways. I could hear Clara's laughter echoing in the distance, warped and haunting, as if the building itself was alive, feeding off my fear. I burst outside, gasping for breath, the cool night air hitting me like a wave. I could still hear her laughter echoing in my mind as I stumbled down the street, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see what was lurking in the shadows. Days passed, but the encounter haunted me. I deleted my Tinder account, but Clara's image lingered in my mind, a reminder of that chilling night. It was as if she had awakened something within me, something I couldn't shake off. I found myself questioning everything, my choices, my fears, my very existence. And just when I thought I had escaped her grasp, I received a message one evening. It was from an unknown number, but the text was unmistakable. "I hope you're not running from yourself." As my heart raced and the shadows of my mind crept back in, I realized that Clara wasn't just a match. She was a reflection, a piece of a puzzle I had yet to solve. I've always thought of myself as a pretty cautious person, especially when it comes to online dating. But after a few weeks of swiping on Tinder and getting nowhere, I figured, why not take a chance? That's how I met him. His name was Alex, and his profile was like something out of a movie. Handsome, charming, and with a killer smile that seemed to promise adventure. I could feel my heart race as I read his bio. He was into hiking, photography, and movies. Pretty standard stuff. But there was something magnetic about him. We matched instantly, and our conversation flowed effortlessly. It felt like I'd known him forever. We decided to meet up a few days later at a quaint little cafe tucked away in a corner of the city. The place had a cozy vibe, with dim lighting and a playlist of soft indie music. As I walked in, I spotted him right away, sitting at a table in the back, his fingers wrapped around a steaming mug. He looked up as I approached, and that smile hit me like a wave. I sat down, and we dove into conversation. The hours slipped away as we talked about everything, our dreams, our fears, our pasts. But as the sun began to set, I couldn't shake off this strange feeling gnawing at me. There was something in his eyes, a flicker that I couldn't quite place. It was like he was studying me, dissecting my every word. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was just my imagination. After a couple of hours, we decided to take a walk. The city was alive with the sounds of laughter and music, but an unsettling chill crept in as we wandered deeper into the quieter streets. The streetlights cast long shadows, distorting our figures as we strolled side by side. As we walked, he began to share stories about his childhood, tales of family trips and childhood friends. I found myself entranced, but as he spoke, I noticed something odd about the way he described people. It was as if he had a secret history with them, and the more he talked, the more uneasy I felt. There was a darkness lurking beneath his words, a hint of something sinister that made my skin crawl. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. Maybe he was just a bit eccentric, I thought. But then he casually mentioned an old friend from high school who had gone missing. "I always wondered what happened to him," he said, his voice steady, as though he was recounting a mundane fact. I glanced at him, trying to gauge his expression, There was an intensity in his gaze, a flicker of something unsettling that sent a shiver down my spine. For a moment, I felt trapped in that conversation, like I was standing on the edge of a dark abyss, and something was pulling me closer to the edge. I changed the subject, trying to lighten the mood, but the air felt thick with tension. We continued walking, and I could feel the distance between us grow, even as we walked side by side. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but curiosity kept me moving forward. As we reached a small park, he suggested we sit for a bit. I hesitated, but the freshness of the night air was inviting. We found a bench under a large oak tree, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. I tried to relax, but the unease began to fester. I could hear the rustling of leaves and the distant sounds of traffic, but it felt like we were in a bubble, separated from the world. He started telling me about his love for photography, sharing stories about the places he'd visited and the people he'd met. I listened, half-heartedly, my mind racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial. Then he pulled out his phone, scrolling through his gallery until he found a picture he wanted to show me. As he handed me the phone, I glanced at the image. It was a breathtaking landscape, but something in the background caught my eye. There was a figure standing in the distance, partially obscured by trees. My heart hitched. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He shrugged, a casual smile on his face, but I could see the glint of something darker in his eyes. "Just a random person I saw while hiking," he said, his tone nonchalant, but I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I handed the phone back, my fingers trembling slightly. The conversation shifted again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. I tried to steer the talk back to safer grounds, but he was relentless, diving deeper into the subject of his photography. Then, out of nowhere, he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You know, people can be fascinating, especially when you capture them in their most vulnerable moments." I felt a chill run down my spine. There was an eerie intensity in his gaze that made me want to recoil, but I forced a smile, attempting to brush off the growing dread inside me. The park was eerily quiet now, the sounds of the city fading into the background. I glanced around, suddenly aware of how isolated we were. The shadows around us seemed to stretch and twist, the branches of the oak tree looming over us like gnarled fingers. My heart raced as I considered my options. Maybe it was time to wrap this up and head home. I suggested we call it a night, but he didn't seem to want to let go. He insisted on walking me to my car, and against my better judgment, I agreed. As we walked, I could feel his presence beside me, dark and heavy like a storm cloud. The conversation felt forced, and I struggled to keep the mood light, but every word he spoke sent chills racing through me. As we neared my car, I could see the shadows of the streetlights flickering. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking. That's when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement in the bushes nearby. I froze, my heart pounding as I turned to look. Alex followed my gaze, his expression unreadable. "Just a cat," he said, but I could see the glimmer of amusement in his eyes. I didn't laugh. I hurriedly unlocked my car and opened the door, desperate to get inside. But just as I was about to slip behind the wheel, he reached out and touched my arm. "Wait," he said, his voice dripping with a strange urgency. "There's something I need to show you." There was a dark intensity in his eyes that sent alarm bells ringing in my head. I wanted to refuse, to drive away and never look back, but something compelled me to stay. Reluctantly, I nodded, and he led me to a nearby alley. The narrow passage was dimly lit, the walls lined with graffiti and peeling paint. I felt a shiver of apprehension as he pulled out his phone again, scrolling through his images. He finally stopped at a photo that made my blood run cold. It was a blurry image of a girl, her face partially obscured, but I recognized her. It was a girl from my college, someone I'd seen around campus. The caption read, "Lost in the Wild." Panic surged through me as I turned to Alex, my voice trembling. "Where did you take this?" He smiled a wide, unsettling grin that sent chills racing through my spine. "Oh, she was just exploring. You know how it is. People go missing all the time." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Alex wasn't just a photographer. He was something much darker. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I was frozen in place as he leaned closer, his breath warm against my neck. "That's the beauty of it," he said, his voice low and chilling. "You catch them in their most vulnerable moments, and they become part of the story." My heart raced as the pieces fell into place. He had been luring me in, weaving a web of intrigue that hid a much darker reality. I took a step back, my mind racing. I needed to get out of there. I turned and sprinted back to my car, fumbling with the keys as I tried to unlock the door. But before I could slip inside, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Alex standing there, his expression shifting from charming to something much more sinister. "You don't need to run," he said, his voice smooth like honey. "You're part of the story now." In that moment, I understood the depth of my mistake. The thrill of the chase had turned into a nightmare I couldn't escape. As the shadows of the alley closed in around me, I realized that sometimes the monsters we fear are not lurking in the dark corners of our imagination, but are instead smiling at us from across the table, waiting for the perfect moment to strike.